The bull refused to leave the funeral. Then they found out who the boy was. The morning mist hadn't lifted. It curled between the gravestones like smoke, silent and cold, making the small hilltop cemetery feel more like a painting than a place. Trees leaned into the wind, their leaves whispering secrets no one dared say aloud. The sky threatened rain but hadn't yet delivered, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. On a patch of open ground near the chapel, a small wooden casket sat atop rusted stands. It wasn't lacquered or polished, just plain pine. No handles, no inscription, just a name handwritten in pencil on the side, Wyatt Monroe. The townsfolk of Granger's Hollow had shown up in stiff jackets and dark dresses, their boots wet with dew, their faces grim. No family cried at the gravesite. Wyatt's only known relative, his Uncle Ray, was likely passed out drunk in a trailer 2 counties over. He hadn't returned a single call. It was the preacher who paid for the funeral out of pocket, and the gravedigger who made the casket himself. People didn't talk much about Wyatt before. Just a quiet boy who'd shown up in town last spring, skin and bones, clothes too big, eyes too old. Most figured he was trouble waiting to happen. Some folks gave him chores, others gave him looks. No one gave him a home. But now, no one could speak, because of the bull. It stood just beyond the old iron fence that lined the graveyard, a beast of impossible presence. Nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, jet black with jagged white scarring along its ribs and flank. Its right horn had snapped halfway down and never regrew straight. One eye was clouded white, but the other, sharp, dark, and still, never left the coffin. People tried not to stare, but it was impossible. The creature didn't pace or bellow, it just stood, watching. "Whose is it?" a woman whispered to her husband, clutching his arm. "Not from any ranch around here," he said. "I'd know. That one's not normal." They weren't wrong. It looked like something out of a legend, the kind of animal you only saw in paintings of bullfighters or whispered about in rodeo tales. The preacher, Reverend Ellison, cleared his throat and stepped up to the head of the casket. "We are gathered here to lay young Wyatt Monroe to rest, though his time was short and—" A low snort cut through the words. Not loud, not angry, but sharp enough to silence him. Everyone turned. The bull had moved. One slow, deliberate step brought its massive hoof over the fence line. The metal groaned as it brushed past, bending slightly under the animal's bulk. Mud squelched under its weight. "Hey now," said Sheriff Harlan from the back, instinctively placing a hand on the grip of his sidearm. "Let's not get crazy." But no one moved. The animal wasn't charging, wasn't flaring its nostrils or stomping. It simply walked, steady, calm, toward the casket. Gasps rippled through the small crowd as the bull reached the open patch of grass, just feet from the boy's box. A man named Doyle, a ranch hand with more pride than patience, started forward with a shovel in hand. "I'll run it off," he muttered. "Don't," said Reverend Ellison, his voice strangely firm. "Just wait." Doyle hesitated. The bull stopped just before the grave. Then, before anyone could make sense of it, it did something no one could explain. It lowered its head, not as if to strike, not to sniff or stomp. The bull bent at the knees slightly, front legs folding in as it rested its muzzle on the dirt, inches from the casket's base. Its cloudy eye blinked slowly, and then the sound came, a soft, low moan, long and drawn out. It wasn't pain. It wasn't a warning. It was grief. Someone behind Sheriff Harlan let out a quiet, trembling, "Dear God." Tears formed in Reverend Ellison's eyes. He reached into his coat, pulled out his old Bible, and closed it softly. "I don't think he needs words today," he said, voice cracking. This boy had a friend. The sky, which had held steady all morning, finally gave in. Rain started to fall, slow at first, then heavier. People opened umbrellas or pulled up jackets, but no one moved toward the bull, not even the sheriff, and the bull didn't move either. It stayed exactly where it was, lying there in the rain, its black hide slick with water, its breath slow and steady. The rain soaked the coffin. The wood darkened. Someone whispered, "What kind of animal does that?" Another replied, "That ain't just any bull." And in a quiet voice that cut through the murmur, an old man named Thomas, who'd once run the county fairgrounds, said, "That's Diablo." The name hung in the air like a curse. A dozen heads turned. Thomas didn't look at them, just stared at the beast. He used to fight in the outlaw circuits, rodeos no lawman ever dared go near. 13 riders tried him, broke one's back, split another's skull, vanished 2 years ago after he killed a man in El Paso. His voice dropped. "A man with a whip." Gasps again. Some people stepped back. A few murmured, ready to leave. But the bull never lifted his head. Rain fell harder now. Thunder cracked over the hills, and Diablo wept, not with tears, but with the kind of silence that makes even nature hold still. Reverend Ellison stepped forward and placed a hand gently on the casket. "Wyatt Monroe, may your soul find rest, and may the ones you loved never forget you." The bull stirred, just slightly, a breath deeper than the last. No one clapped, no one said amen. There were no hymns, no roses, no doves released into the gray sky. Only the rain, the boy, and the bull who wouldn't leave. And as the mourners quietly dispersed, many stealing glances back, crossing themselves or whispering superstitions, the sheriff stood last, watching Diablo through the curtain of rain. "Lord help us," he muttered, jaw tight. "This ain't over." He didn't know yet what had burned that barn down, or why Wyatt had no family willing to claim him. He didn't know where Diablo had come from, or how a 12-year-old boy had tamed a monster that couldn't be broken. But something in the sheriff's gut twisted as he watched the animal lie still beside the grave. Because this wasn't just grief, it was loyalty, and behind loyalty, there's always a story someone didn't want told. The rain hadn't let up, not for hours. Long after the mourners left the cemetery, the downpour kept falling, blanketing the hillside in silence. Diablo hadn't moved. He remained there beside Wyatt's casket, soaked to the bone, still as a statue. From the sheriff's truck parked just beyond the gates, the engine ticking, Sheriff Harlan watched with narrowed eyes and a gut that wouldn't quit twisting. He rolled the window down halfway and lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. "Hell of a thing," he muttered. Beside him, Deputy Griggs squinted through the windshield. "You really think that's the Diablo? The one from the fight circuits?" Harlan exhaled smoke slowly. "Can't say for sure, but if it is, we're sitting on something way bigger than a strange funeral." Behind them, a pickup pulled off the dirt road and into the gravel lot. Doyle climbed out, wiping mud off his boots and heading toward the sheriff's window, umbrella dangling from one hand. "You see this?" Doyle said, jabbing a thumb toward the cemetery. "That bull still hasn't moved. Whole town's talking. People posting pictures. Gonna have tourists out here by morning." "Let 'em come," Harlan said, unfazed. "Ain't breaking any laws just by morning." Doyle scowled. "It's an animal, Harlan. What's it even doing? That ain't normal." No, it wasn't. And that's what had Harlan uneasy. He pushed the door open and stepped out, boots squishing in the soaked earth. As he walked toward the gate, townsfolk started gathering again, umbrellas dotting the hill like wilted flowers. Nobody approached the bull. No one dared. They kept their distance, some whispering, some praying, all watching. "Hey, Sheriff," a voice called from the back of the crowd. "Ain't that Fletcher's bull? He had one look just like that." Another voice chimed in. "Nah, Fletcher's was branded. That one ain't marked." "You sure?" "Diablo never was branded, remember?" "Wait, Diablo? You talking about the rodeo bull?" "Yeah, the one from the fights. Used to tour the circuits down in Texas and New Mexico." A low murmur rippled through the people. Someone pulled up an old photo on their phone. A grainy shot of a younger Diablo bucking a rider into the air like a rag doll. A scar on the shoulder, horn bent just like the one before them. It matched. Too perfectly to ignore. Sheriff Harlan turned back toward the cemetery. "If that's Diablo," he said under his breath, "then how the hell did a 12-year-old boy get his hands on him?" No one had an answer. Later that evening, Harlan sat at his desk in the sheriff's office, soaked boots off, flipping through town records. Rain drummed against the window. The smell of wet paper and burnt coffee filled the room. He had pulled Wyatt's file. Not that it had much, just a brief intake form, scribbled notes from a county worker, and a photo of a skinny boy with messy hair and hollow eyes. No birth certificate, no social security number. just a foster placement form stamped with the name of a temporary guardian. R. Monroe. Ray, the same uncle who hadn't shown up for the funeral. Harlan leaned back in his chair and let the silence swallow him. The deputy poked his head in. "Sheriff, I talked to the vet over in Baldwin County. Said he remembers a boy showing up last fall with a limping dog. Said the kid patched it up himself better than most trained techs." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "Wyatt?" "Yup. Said he had a kind way about him. Didn't ask for payment. Didn't even talk much. Just said the dog needed help." The sheriff leaned forward. "Did he mention where the boy was staying?" The deputy shook his head. "Said he just vanished." That matched what Harlan had been hearing all day. He stood and grabbed his coat. "I'm going out to the North Ridge, where the barn burned." "You think there's more out there?" "I think we've been looking at this all wrong," Harlan muttered. "That boy wasn't just lost. He was hiding." The drive out to the ridge was slick and dark. Mud splattered the fenders. Pines loomed overhead like watchmen, silent and tall. The barn itself had long since collapsed. Nothing more than charred beams, ash, and the rusted remains of a chicken coop. But the sheriff parked and walked the grounds carefully, flashlight beams sweeping through the rubble. He stopped when the light landed on something half buried beneath a blackened tarp, a child's backpack, scorched around the edges but still intact. He pulled it free and unzipped it slowly. Inside were animal wraps, a cracked bottle of iodine, a rusted horseshoe, and a damp notebook. Flipping it open, he read, "Fox, leg mending. Needs quiet. Goat still limps. Try warm cloth. Diablo's horn bled again. Let him rest. He trusts me now. Won't run." The handwriting was crooked, childlike, but the words held purpose. The sheriff's heart sank. He flipped further. More notes, feeding schedules, treatment drawings, even a diagram of a makeshift pen built from old fence wire and pallets. This wasn't just a barn. It had been a sanctuary. For the broken. Back in town, the whispers were growing louder. At Ellie's diner, coffee steamed while folks debated in hushed tones over vinyl booths. At the gas station, a group of teens showed a video on their phones of Diablo lying beside the grave in the pouring rain, his side rising and falling slow as breath itself. But it was the town elder, Thomas, former rodeo announcer, who said it loudest. "That boy saved him," he muttered, staring at the screen. "And I don't mean just fed him, I mean changed him." "Changed a bull?" someone scoffed. Thomas nodded, eyes distant. Diablo wasn't just feared, he was abused. Men broke glass in his feed, whipped him till his sides bled, shot him with electric prods. They tried to turn him into a monster. But monsters don't mourn, do they? No one had an answer. Later that night, Sheriff Harlan returned to the cemetery. Diablo was still there, now lying fully on his side beside the grave, rain soaking the grass around them. The storm had passed, but the air was thick with fog. The sheriff stepped through the gate, boots crunching softly. He walked within 5 feet of the bull before stopping. "I know you're not just here for show," he said quietly. "I know what he meant to you." The bull opened one eye. Harlan crouched slowly and placed the notebook on the ground beside the casket. "I found it in the barn. Everything he did for you. For all of them." He looked up at the beast, voice low. "Someone didn't want that barn to stand. Somebody made sure it burned." The bull didn't move. But in the quiet, as fog rolled across the hill, Harlan saw something he couldn't explain. Diablo's nostrils flared, and he looked, not at the sheriff, but toward the trees beyond the fence, as if waiting, or listening, and in the distance, a twig snapped. By sunrise, Sheriff Harlan was back at the ridge. This time he brought gloves, a shovel, and a quiet fire in his chest that hadn't let up since the night before. The cemetery still held its strange vigil. Diablo hadn't moved. Townsfolk were starting to treat him like a ghost or guardian, leaving flowers by the gate, even candles. But Harlan had no time for that now. He needed answers, not folklore. The barn stood like a blackened skeleton against the fog, charcoal beams leaning, warped nails sticking out like rusted teeth. The ground was muddy from the constant rain, and smoke still lingered in the soil like it refused to forget. He crouched beside a collapsed wall and began pulling back debris, slow, methodical, careful not to destroy what might be left. A scorched tarp peeled away to reveal a cluster of old burlap sacks stacked like cushions. When he brushed one open, hay spilled out, clean beneath the burn. Next to it, a cracked plastic bowl with kibble still inside. On the far side of the barn's remains, a rusted bucket held what looked like boiled rags. Another corner revealed broken tools, some bent into shapes that didn't make sense until you realized what they were: splints, animal braces. Harlan stood slowly, piecing it all together. "Son of a gun," he whispered. This hadn't been a squat. It was a clinic, a tiny makeshift haven run by a child who knew more about mercy than most grown men. Then he saw it, pinned to a half-burned support beam, fluttering in the breeze like a ghost. A rodeo poster, water-warped but still legible. DIABLO in bold red letters. The infamous bull, mid-buck, muscles flexed, a rider mid-air. Across the top, scrawled in a child's handwriting with a marker that had bled through the paper, "You don't have to fight no more." Harlan's breath caught. He stared at the message, the picture, the nail holding it in place. And for a second, all the noise in his head, grief, confusion, anger, went quiet. This boy hadn't just fed the bull, he'd freed it. Behind the barn, the ground opened into a thin stretch of field leading into the hills. And there, just beyond the last beam, were fresh hoofprints, deep ones, heading out, hoofprints far too big to belong to a deer. He knelt and brushed away some leaves. A halter sat half buried in the mud. The leather was worn to the grain, but one thing remained clear, burned into the buckle in tiny letters, barely visible beneath the rust. Wyatt. No brand, no ranch name, just the boys. He gripped the halter tighter. This bull hadn't wandered here by accident. He came for Wyatt. Back in town, Harlan headed straight to the records office. He marched past the clerk and down into the county archives, where files collected dust in warped drawers and folders dated back decades. He asked for Wyatt's foster case file. At first, the clerk resisted. "That's sealed, Sheriff." "Unseal it," Harlan said, voice low, "or find someone who will." 10 minutes later, a manila folder landed on his desk. He opened it slowly, fingers trembling. Wyatt Monroe, born in Jackson Parish. Parents deceased in a house fire. Multiple placements. Notes scribbled in red pen. Withdrawn. Resistant. Trust issues. Then under final placement. Raymond Monroe, uncle, licensed guardian, removed after physical marks were found. Child absconded. There it was again, 2 lines at the very end, near the bottom. Placed at Cedar Group Home, reported missing 3 weeks later. Believed deceased in structure fire on rural property. Harlan read it again. Believed. There'd been no investigation, no charges, just a closed file and a boy left for dead. He stood, heart pounding, and called Deputy Griggs. "Get me fire incident reports from 3 months ago. Anything involving minors or suspected arson." A few hours later, Griggs returned with a box. "There's something you'll want to see," he said. One file stood out. House fire, North Ridge property, no known adult residents on site. Child remains found, unidentifiable, presumed to be Wyatt based on belongings. But what Harlan noticed was the signature on the bottom. Investigating Officer Wade Tallman, a former deputy. Dismissed for misconduct 6 months back. Sheriff Harlan stared at the name like it was poison. "Where's Tallman now?" he asked. "Runs private security," Griggs muttered. "Out-of-state contract. He was in town just 2 days ago." A chill crawled down Harlan's spine. He looked at the burn report again. Too many blanks, too many assumptions, no real investigation, and then, under the possible cause line, likely electrical. No foul play suspected. Bulletin. That night, Harlan returned to the cemetery, flashlight in hand. The air was sharp with dew, and the moon cut cold lines across the ground. Diablo stood again, not lying down anymore, eyes fixed toward the hills. He heard him before he saw him, a rustle in the trees. Harlan raised the light. Out stepped Thomas, the old rodeo announcer. His coat was soaked, hat tipped low. "You saw the hoof prints, too," he said, voice grave. Harlan nodded. Thomas took a slow breath. "There was talk, back in the rodeo days. That bull, Diablo. He didn't break because of his strength. He broke because a boy sat with him for weeks. Didn't ride him, didn't cage him, just sat, talked, waited. The same bull that put grown men in wheelchairs started walking beside a kid who sang to him. Harlan's throat went dry. "You're saying, Wyatt," "I'm saying," Thomas cut in, "that boy saved something everyone else gave up on." A pause. "And now, that bull's trying to save him." The next morning, Harlan went to the regional office and requested access to federal incident reports. Through backdoor connections and a lot of polite threats, he got them. It confirmed what he feared. The fire wasn't caused by wiring. Accelerants had been found in the ashes, but the detail had been redacted from the local version of the report. Someone had edited it, cleaned it, buried it. There had been foul play, and Wyatt hadn't just lived there, he'd been targeted. Back in Granger's Hollow, the townspeople were changing. Kids started leaving candles at the grave. Someone brought a bale of hay for Diablo, which he accepted gently before returning to his place beside the coffin. People began whispering less and watching more. The story was spreading, online, in whispers, in headlines from nearby counties. The bull who wouldn't leave. And still, the sheriff kept digging. Because the boy they'd buried hadn't just found a friend. He'd left behind a secret, a truth worth killing for. And Sheriff Harlan was ready to unearth it, even if it meant setting fire to everything they thought they knew. The funeral ended under a gray, weeping sky. The townsfolk had long since returned to their homes, boots muddy, hearts heavier than the soil they'd shoveled. But Diablo didn't move. He remained still beside the small wooden cross planted at the top of the hill, his massive frame hunched low, legs folded beneath him, like some ancient sentinel guarding a fallen comrade. Rain trickled off his thick hide in quiet rivulets. Each drop landed with the weight of silence. For the next day, and the day after, he stayed. Refused food, refused water. When the vet came with tranquilizers, Diablo's eyes followed the needle, and no one dared approach. Sheriff Harlan, watching from the gravel road, muttered under his breath, "He ain't staying here 'cause he's stubborn. He's staying 'cause he remembers." Word spread like lightning across counties, the bull that grieved. Reporters flooded Granger's Hollow with cameras and plastic smiles. Animal rights groups pitched tents near the ridge. Some called it a miracle, others a spectacle. But none could explain the look in Diablo's eyes. Rage, yes, but under it, sorrow, the kind that sinks into the bones. Then came the pickup. 3 days later, just past noon, its engine thundered up the dirt road like a war drum. Black Ford Raptor, chrome wheels, tinted windows so dark they swallowed the reflection of the sky. Texas plates. People stopped talking. Every eye turned. Out stepped Deke Brogan. Sheriff Harlan was leaning against the hood of his cruiser when the man emerged. Cowboy hat tilted, boots polished, sunglasses gleaming despite the overcast sky. 2 other men followed. Broad-shouldered, sleeveless shirts, the kind of muscle that didn't come from gym work but something more dangerous. "Well, I'll be," Deke said, stepping out with a smirk like he owned the clouds. "That is my bull." Harlan pushed off his cruiser slowly. "Don't reckon he wants to go with you." Deke laughed. It was hollow, the kind that echoed too long in the chest. "He don't get to want. He's property. I got papers." He held them up, laminated, signed. Diablo lifted his head at the voice but didn't rise. His gaze stayed fixed. "You'd really drag him off that boy's grave?" Harlan asked, voice low. Deke took off his sunglasses. His eyes were cold. "That boy was squattin'. He stole my bull, hid him up in them hills, raised him wrong." "He saved him," Harlan said. "You don't know that." "I know enough." Harlan's hand moved to the grip of his revolver. "And I know this ain't the place to come pushing your past." The crowd began gathering, hushed. Diablo was up now, slowly, muscle by muscle like a mountain rising. He faced Deke, hooves digging into the wet earth. That low, guttural sound came from his chest again. Not a roar, not a growl, something older, something that didn't belong in this century. "Easy now," Deke muttered to his men. "Go on, rope him." One of them stepped forward, and Diablo charged. It wasn't a lunge, it was a storm, a flash of muscle and fury, thunder rolling beneath his hooves. The man dropped his rope and dove. tumbling into the grass just as Diablo's horn clipped the mirror off the truck door. "Jesus!" someone yelled. The other man ran, slipping in the mud. Deke stood frozen. Harlan's revolver was up now, hammer cocked. "Stand down," the sheriff barked. "Nobody else moves." Diablo skidded to a halt in front of Deke, steam bursting from his nostrils, his entire body trembling like a taut wire. He didn't strike again. He just stared. An animal's silence louder than any scream. "He ain't yours anymore," Harlan said. "He chose." Deke's voice came hoarse now, ego peeled raw. "You all gonna believe some broken foster kid over me?" And from the crowd, a shout cut the air like lightning. "We found the video!" Cameras turned. A young reporter, barely 20, soaked to the bone, held her phone up. A screen flickered. A blurry timestamp. Grainy, shaky footage. The barn. Fire licking the edge of the hayloft. A scream. Then a figure, small, limping, dragging a feed bag and coughing through the smoke. Wyatt. He ran back inside not once but twice, pulling animals free. A blind goat, a pigeon, a dog missing half a leg. And then, Deke. The same man now standing before them, just younger, cleaner shaven, his voice rising in the video. "I told you to leave them. Let it burn." He struck the boy across the jaw. Wyatt fell. The camera wobbled. Then silence, until the fire bloomed higher. Back in the present, Deke's face had gone pale. His mouth moved, but no words came. "You lied on the paperwork," the reporter said. "You never put your name down as guardian. You were running an illegal rodeo, weren't you?" The crowd started murmuring. Sheriff Harlan didn't look at Deke. He kept his eyes on Diablo. "He didn't just grieve," he said. "He stayed because he knew you'd come." Deke stepped backward. Diablo didn't move. His massive head lowered again, but this time not in sorrow. Sheriff Harlan stepped between them. "You touch him," he said coldly, "and I'll show you what justice for Wyatt looks like." The silence was so sharp, it could have sliced skin. Deke turned. No one followed him. Not the men, not the crowd, not even the wind. He climbed back into the Raptor, slammed the door, and peeled off down the road, leaving behind a trail of mud, failure, and truth. Diablo returned to the grave and lay down, this time resting his head across the cross itself. Cameras stopped flashing. Reporters lowered their mics. No one said a word. Not yet. Not until the rain came again and washed away the last of the tire tracks. But from that day forward, folks remembered more than just Wyatt. They remembered who came for him and who didn't. And in the stillness where justice met grief, they remembered the bull that mourned like a man,